Overall, ODST is one of the better games of this year. Some people might think it's a little overpriced, but really, if you...
Who's this sad little boy struggling to speak? Well, that's me, reviewing Halo 3 ODST 1 week after its launch. It's moments like these that make me wonder just what exactly was I thinking, and how someone else could possibly think that it's great. But it also reminds me how I started, and where I've gone. I mean, these TV-length breakdowns are getting so much more attention, right? Right? But far more baffling than people's ability to watch my videos without going into a coma is my own contradicting praise of this game. My poorly written description says that ODST is overpriced, yet I gave it a practical 9 out of 10 and a badge of approval. At first I thought it's because I reviewed the game as a naive 14-year-old, but a quick hop into the Google DeLorean back to 2009 reveals that it wasn't just me. While not reaching the upper echelon of Xbox 360 ratings on Metacritic like Halo 3, ODST still received overwhelming praise. Quotes such as "might be the last game you need to buy this year" and "definitely worth the $60 price tag" were all too common among critics. Reviews such as my own are part of the reason why I'm making this series in the first place. People love Halo, but that means it's often not viewed objectively, and given credit without investigation. This is where things begin to get more interesting, because ODST is the first time that the Halo community did not share an almost universal love of a new release, and when the franchise was no longer the go-to shooter to copy. Halo 3 is undoubtedly a huge success story, but its conclusion foreshadowed that the Halo brand, while a lucrative property, was no longer king of the hill.
Can I play Call of Duty for now? Fuck you.
Bungie innovated with each game, but their scale of innovation was decreasing, if only because the original benchmark was set so high. The series went from arguably redefining an entire genre of games on consoles, to founding a new blueprint in multiplayer gaming, to expanding community features on an exclusive platform. It's hard for a company to change the industry every 3 years, especially within a single franchise, and Bungie deserves credit for being able to do as much as they did. But it became clear that the developer, while still passionate about the franchise, felt that it earned the right to go back to entering uncharted territory as an independent company. But when a consistent money generator is made, publishers understandably don't want to let go of it. As a result, Microsoft made an offer. Bungie would be able to go independent, as long as they did 2 more Halo games after Halo 3 and sold the franchise to Microsoft. Bungie accepted. So how does ODST factor into all of this? Well, that's hard to answer, because ODST's development is unclear. A Brave New World and Bungie's VDoc phrased the development as, "We've got 1 year to get a game out the door." Yet, when the game was first announced at Tokyo Game Show as Halo 3 Recon, the developers interviewed referred to it as a standalone expansion.
Halo 3 Recon is an expansion. It is a standalone retail product. It will be sold in a box, available next fall.
So Microsoft's deal changed. Or ODST was not the original second game in this 2-product deal. In 2008, Halo Chronicles was in development as an interactive storytelling game with some of Bungie's staff working alongside Peter Jackson and a game development studio in New Zealand, curiously titled Wingnut Interactive. This project would later be cancelled in 2009, and the Bungie employees hired to work on it moved on to ODST. Due to a lack of hard evidence to make any sort of case, or at least in my research, all we can do is speculate. I find that the truth is typically found somewhere in the middle. Based on the few details we have, I believe Bungie when they say that the ODST project grew from what they originally intended. But I think it's also likely that Microsoft said, "You have a campaign that's the same length as other games. Why can't you sell this as a full $60 product instead of a standalone expansion?" It's also key to remember that by this point, the rest of Bungie is working on Halo Reach, and the company is almost free from being underneath Microsoft. I wouldn't put it past them to make ODST a full release simply to satisfy Microsoft's desire for higher profit margins and to leave on good terms with them. Does this mean that Bungie didn't want to make the game in the first place? No. As said earlier, Bungie, while tired, still cared about their baby. The development of ODST was plagued with restrictions. The majority of Bungie's employees were busy working on the final game in the franchise for them, leaving a handful of artists, a couple engineers, some writers, a few designers, and Marty and Joe left to complete the project. Aside from a smaller team, the game's also stuck with using an outdated engine, reused assets, animations, and physics. To top it all off, many of the same team members already spent a year working on Halo Chronicles, leaving 14 months for ODST to be made. With all of these challenges to overcome, Bungie threw away any notion of making dramatic changes to the gameplay. Any attempt would be gimmicky at best, and damaging to Halo's core at the worst. I'm sure there are many things Bungie wanted to do in ODST, but simply couldn't. One of the VDocs may claim otherwise, but I don't think Microsoft or Bungie CEOs for that matter would allow their developers to say anything remotely negative about the latest product. Saying, "we wish we had more time," raises the unflattering question of, why don't they? The answer's probably not very artistic either. Unable to alter the game's core design or add in tons of new assets, the developers decided to alter as many of the elements surrounding that core as they could. Some of these are successful, others not so much. Which are which? Well, let's find out. Neo-noir is a genre I'd never seen in a Halo game, but immediately adored upon experiencing it. While the opening certainly has the appearance of Bulwer Lytton meets Star Wars, the true opening is the pod drop. This sequence, where your character, the Rookie, is being sent down to New Mombasa, starts the game with a concocted mixture of tension, excitement, and if you played Halo 2, nostalgia. The tension comes from Trisha Helfer's character of Dare, conveniently the ex-lover of the ODST squad leader, Edward Buck. The game is aware of this, though, and actually raises the question of why Buck is being dragged along in the game's first mission before the player does. The Alliance Naval Intelligence is an organization in the Halo universe that's been kept in the shadows, and hasn't received much attention in the games because of their lack of direct involvement with the Master Chief. ODST is the first time outside of the extended universe that we get some more dirt on what ONI's all about, using Dare as their representative. Questions are raised the moment it's revealed that you're not going to land on the Covenant carrier while in the middle of the pod drop, like your squad originally planned, followed by the city-wide explosion from Halo 2. Your character wakes up several hours later during the night, left on his own, with no contact to anyone in or outside the city. It's a classic video game setup that is ripe with opportunities for personal storytelling and freedom for the player. Bungie had experience with large levels, but they weren't open world, and they weren't constructing a human city set 500 years in the future. New Mombasa, even with Halo 2 behind them, was a new challenge. The decision to bathe this city in night with a unique musical score and constant loneliness is one of the best that Bungie made for this game. Despite the engine's inability to render rain, the city evokes such a melancholy that is unlike anything else in the Halo trilogy, and rarely seen in mainstream games at the time. The notes written on city walls, traces of Covenant firefights, and vehicles scattered around really help bring the city to life with very minimal resources. Even in the daytime missions, the artists and storytellers do an excellent job of leaving traces of outside events. Your first mission controlling Buck has you stumbling upon a bunch of Covenant elites that died in battle, hinting at the civil war between the elites and brutes in Halo 2. Moments like these are frequent when sought after, and help sell the world as a real, tangible place. ODST's superb atmosphere is largely attributed to the score. This game is arguably Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore's best work. Despite no use of monks, and instruments that were never previously used in the series, the soundtrack is unquestionably Halo, yet wholly unique to this game. Distorted guitars and pounding war drums during the daytime missions contrast brilliantly with the eerie but beautiful nighttime scores. Not all of the tracks are ones that you'll be humming to in your car, but at worst, a song in ODST enhances the mood and atmosphere, and at best, it sends shivers down the spine. Best track? One that happens to contain an instrument I normally hate, but when in the hands of these composers, makes the song. Another contributor to the atmosphere are the audio logs, or Sadie's story, which give context for what the city was like during the Covenant attack on Earth from a civilian's perspective. Collect enough of them and you even get a glimpse at the game's main twist early on. In my last video, I discussed Bungie learning to implement little chunks of story and context to enhance missions, and ODST does the same with the Superintendent, an AI responsible for keeping New Mombasa in order. It helps turn gameplay reward systems like the supply caches into an AI trying to help you survive against the Covenant. By and large, ODST's atmosphere was what received the most attention from the team, and it holds up very well. But on further inspection, when you remove the music and sound design and start observing the technicals, it's far less impressive. From a design standpoint, the open world of New Mombasa is very bare bones. There's a real lack of secret pathways or large revelations, and even Sadie's story, while good, doesn't tie in with your exploration, other than helping characterize the city before your arrival and show the Superintendent's loyalty. New Mombasa is also littered with dead ends that at best give you an extra grenade, and the large doors really do hurt your progression when using vehicles, either to hide load times or to not give away how small the open world is, or both. Speaking of progression, there's not a whole lot in this city. You explore different parts of it and you can unlock the supply caches I mentioned, but there's not really a sense of learning the ins and outs of the world. You're not beginning with your ODST's exclusive gear and concluding with vehicle shortcut knowledge and decked out weapons. In fact, I don't think Bungie even needed to go that far. They could have saved the ODST's vision enhancer for later, perhaps gaining it from one of the clues you stumble upon towards the end. This could have made the player see the city in a way they didn't at the start, but that's where we move on from atmosphere and begin to talk about the characters and plot. Bungie being fans of Firefly isn't much of a surprise. There's many similarities in Halo's character dialogue and the witty banter of a Joss Whedon cast. Bringing back a Serenity trio of Nathan Fillion, Adam Baldwin, and Alan Tudyk can end up on either spectrum of quality. This is not due to the actors' talent, but what they're given. We know from their resume of work that all three are gifted and are not restricted to just the characters they're most famous for. Sadly, many in the entertainment industry can only see actors one way, in turn degenerating some talent into stereotypes of themselves. Now, are Bungie guilty of this in ODST? People are quick to talk about Edward Buck when discussing ODST, and at first glance, this is because of Nathan Fillion's charisma. But upon closer examination, I believe it's simply because out of all the characters, he's by far the most fleshed out. Perhaps the writers felt an obligation to give him more treatment since he's the squad's leader, but the end result is that most players are going to care a lot more about him than any of his subordinates. At no fault of the actors who are just doing most what they can with the material they're given, Dutch, Mickey, and Romeo, while not unlikable, aren't all that compelling. Their personalities are slightly varied, and because of that, each feel different to play, even while using the same mechanics and weapons, but these personalities are all walking cliches. Dutch is the hardened fighter, Mickey is the wisecracking demolitions expert, and Romeo is the sarcastic know-it-all. Actually, part of the problem I have with this squad is the same problem I have with Joss Whedon's writing. The characters, while different, don't have a unique voice. They all crack wise, jab at their teammates, and yet retain a strand of professionalism. This is why I think Buck is the best character by default. He's got punchlines, but unlike the others, Buck's attitude feels like something's behind it. He's not a completely damaged soul like Malcolm Reynolds, but he's worn out, having survived genocide on the planet Reach, only to fight the Covenant again on Earth. Now, while the story does have a character bias, the group of ODSTs do benefit from the actors' natural chemistry already seen on other shows. And they do a good job of making these ODSTs more distinguished, despite 3 out of the 5 voice actors having already contributed voices to Halo 3. I've talked about all the characters except one, the Rookie. The blank slate for the player to inhabit, going farther than the Master Chief in being a completely silent protagonist. Grunts and heavy breathing during firefights are all the sounds you'll get, but he's thankfully not a robot. The animators do a great job of humanizing the Rookie in the cutscenes while he's investigating clues you stumble upon. Which brings me to the story. ODST's storytelling has been praised by critics and fans alike for taking a different approach, with multiple characters, investigations, flashbacks, and events taking place over the course of a single day. I used to think that ODST is one of the better stories in Halo, but after analyzing the plot, like I have for the last 3 games I covered in the series, I'm disappointed. Let's lay this down. Your character wakes up hours after being dropped from his ODST pod. He gets out to explore the city when he stumbles upon something that belongs to a squad mate. He picks it up, and he puts it down. He does this again, and again, and again until he's done it 6 times in total, walking point to point in the city each time, surviving dozens of Covenant attacks along the way, all so he can pick up things from the ground until he gets a phone call from his commander's ex-girlfriend. This is the literal chain of events that occur with this character, and it makes absolutely no sense. Worse, it means that the character's actions aren't related to anything that happens in the story. The Rookie could have woken up a little later and receive a transmission from Dare the moment he leaves the pod, and the story wouldn't have been any different. The connection between the gameplay and story from Halo 3 and the Superintendent from this game is missing from this game's clues and storyline with the Rookie. I give the writers credit for trying a different approach, but good intentions don't mean the mistakes can't be made. Something else that doesn't add much to this game's structure is how it uses its open world. Because you can explore the city freely, you can tackle these missions in any order you choose. But this isn't The Walking Dead 100 Days, where each mission is its own self-contained story. Sure, they use different characters and take place in different areas of New Mombasa, but missions still lead into one another and follow a list that the game's main menu gives away. These missions are even laid out in such a way that ensures the large majority of players are going to complete the missions in the order they were intended. You have to go out of your way to play these levels non-linearly, ignoring previous ones along the way and with no payoff. There's nothing to gain from playing a later mission before an earlier one. Story-wise, it just spoils previous levels. If you see Buck heal Romeo, then you know Romeo's not in danger in the end of the mission taking place before. Gameplay-wise, it means you can be stuck playing 2 vehicle-focused missions in a row instead of being properly spread out. The campaign's much better when you go through it in the original order. Its pacing is as good, if not better, than Halo 3 between large outdoor environments, tight close-quarters battles, and vehicle levels. And you can see the city's atmosphere progressively change in the original order, starting at early morning and ending at night with Buck before going back to early morning again with the game's final mission. Playing this game's campaign non-linearly is akin to watching a TV show out of order, providing no benefit to the story, gameplay, or pacing, making this entire story structure completely pointless. I concede that playtime with the Rookie's quiet hub world contrasts well with the action-packed daytime missions, but in regards to clues and the ideas of searching for your teammates, this falls completely flat. Now what about the twist? Halo had the Flood, Halo 2 had the Arbiter, Halo 3 had... whatever. ODST's main reveal is much like the game's tone, where it's serious but also subtle and comparatively low-key. Since Buck's first mission, the player encounters these things. They're given no name until later with the plot twist. There's even scenes in the open world where you get glimpses of them in their interaction with the Covenant. Ostensibly, it seems like these creatures are a new enemy type, as they give Covenant soldiers overshields, but they never attack you, and die whenever you kill all enemies they were assisting, leaving Veronica Dare to reveal exactly what these creatures are. Engineers are a slave species in the Covenant that are biological supercomputers, with this particular one not only having information on the Covenant, but also the Superintendent's data. This twist is a reversal of the one Bungie have used multiple times, and are still going to use, but it's subtle enough not to hurt the experience, and the concepts and ideas the engineers bring up are fascinating. And their endearing look and sound make first-time players question why they could be considered a threat from a distance. I do wish it was possible not to ever kill these enemies or possibly be able to free them for people playing through it a second time, especially since Dare gets frustrated with Buck upon hearing the news that he's killed a few, even though the player has no real option not to. Either way, the twist is successful, and the cutscenes and interactions with the engineer are pretty adorable. When it comes to gameplay, there's not a whole lot to discuss, at least in terms of core gameplay, because it's Halo 3, with the same animations, weapons, AI, and physics, meaning it's just as polished and enjoyable as before. What's different are the locations and, in turn, level design. The city of New Mombasa leads to a lot of encounters that feature more cover than what's typically seen in a Halo game, and the little changes Bungie made to your ODST character help emphasize the design. Shields are replaced with stamina, and your ODST lacks the strength of a traditional Spartan. Uplift Rescue's large arenas would be standard fare for the Chief, but playing as Dutch becomes more of a challenge. Halo games typically have you doing large amounts of damage from afar or up close, whereas ODST requires a balance. This is also seen with the game's two exclusive weapons, your suppressed submachine gun and pistol. The SMG is excellent for taking down shields, and the pistol is great for headshots, but neither is super strong, forcing you to time uses effectively. I said that Halo 3 is a hybrid of Halos 1 and 2, but ODST further leans towards combat evolved with these two weapons. It's almost the same setup as the assault rifle and pistol combo, with the main difference being that your pistol is nowhere near as lethal, requiring precise shots. Bungie's talent in level design is very much alive in this game, with the urban environment only improving the experience, and satisfying fans of Halo 2 who wanted more time on Earth. The only disappointment in the campaign from a gameplay standpoint is its concluding stage. Not only is it the last hurrah vehicle run we've seen twice, but it's also an escort mission, concluding with Horde mode. 3 overused tropes all packaged into one finale. I'm not too salty over Bungie hammering out an ending to a game that spent only a year in development, but it's a shame that one with some of Bungie's best level design ends on the game's lowest point. When playing ODST, I always try and keep in mind what the development and team size was like, but I don't feel like an ODST soldier when playing this game. Sure, they added head bobbing when you crouch, and the health bar, and weapons, voices, decreased melee damage, jumping, fall damage, visor mode, and no dual wielding. But it's just not enough to shake the feeling that you're really a Spartan who's put on some weight. An ODST should not be able to jump a truck, punch a brute, or no-scope a jackal with alien weaponry. I'm not saying ODST should have taken cues from Demon's Souls, but I do think that instead of working on Chronicles for a year, only to cancel it and squeeze out an expansion that's then turned into a full-price product, there could have been a real opportunity to create a different style of Halo game. One where enemies like Hunters, Brute Chieftains, and Elite Generals require preparation similar to the Big Daddies in BioShock, powerful foes that scare the player and force you to consider every little action you make and a piece of equipment you have to take them down. The custom pistol and SMG require you to make effective use of their magazine size and low damage, but if you've played Halo games before, this is second nature, making enemies such as brutes still feel like cannon fodder. Even on higher difficulty modes, most of the challenge comes from your character's low health and inability to avoid taking damage in vehicle sections. One-on-one battles still feel very easy. We've read and listened to stories told in the Halo mythos that portray enemies like jackals as 7-foot-tall bloodthirsty creatures. I can see why to an 8-foot-tall Spartan super soldier they wouldn't pose much of a threat. But the ODSTs, while elite, are not Spartans. And it'd be nice to have a game where grunts and jackals aren't seen as a joke, and brutes, elites, and hunters are overwhelming enemies that can easily put you 6 feet under if you make a mistake. The gameplay potential with ODST is unquantifiable, and it's a shame that such a great idea is attached to a project that is at the behest of an unfair reality. There are many ways you can judge Halo 3 ODST. As a $60 retail product meant to compete against full packages, it's hard to argue that it's not a simple cash grab. Taken as an old-school expansion in the vein of Half-Life Opposing Force, Crisis Warhead, or Fear Extraction Point, it's pretty great, making effective use of Halo 3's mechanics, gameplay, and level design. Viewed as a story-driven game, it kind of falls apart when you realize how pointless things like the clues and mission structure are. As a first foray into playing a non-Spartan character, it's not successful due to trying to retain Halo 3's gameplay. This is why I think opinions of ODST are so varied in the community. None of these expectations are necessarily wrong. The game is a victim of inconsistent marketing and corporate politics, which unfortunately means that the game suffers from an identity crisis, and that confusion of what it is affects people's expectations of it. All I can do is view ODST the way that I always look at games when reviewing or analyzing them. Judging on its own terms, taking into consideration the unconventional development, and seeing everything the game attempts and offers, Halo 3 ODST is a solid game that's still worth playing all these years later, even if I still feel bad for having given it a 9 out of 10 as my young, dumb self.